People tend to want to open all the doors and to know all the secrets and to tear away all the veils. It's an illusion to think that just looking behind a door, behind a threshold, will leave you yourself unchanged.
When you look back at our creative output over the past 9 years, there's a funny thing you notice. For the first 5 years, we were all either in or finishing college, and the output was relentless. More than 200 weekly episodes of a web series, a growing audience, 2 short films. Then, during years 6 and 7, the well had dried up. Our creative output ironically stalled while making a 40-minute film about an esoteric archetype said to prevent you from moving forward. I don't think that's a coincidence. Of all the interpretations of the Dweller we've explored throughout the series, the one that resonates with me the most is Blavatsky's.
She has this quote where she says, "Our Dweller is about us all the time. Everything which conflicts with good is an operation of that Dweller. Everything which prevents us from taking those steps which we can see would be the better ones for us to take is a Dweller. The greatest Dweller we have is doubt, suspicion, fear, lack of faith." So here again, the greatest we have, meaning more than one kind of Dweller. So do they mean that we all have our own Dwellers, or do they mean that we have many Dwellers within us?
I don't believe there's a literal demonic entity wandering around, waiting in doorways and thresholds to torment people until they arrive at some profound existential truth. This is not what I think. What I do think is that the Dweller is a metaphor. More than that, I think there are many Dwellers. Simply put, I agree with the interpretation that whatever prevents us from taking the steps we know are the best ones for us to take is a Dweller. Therefore, there are many, and everyone has these Dwellers, whether they label them as such or view them in this occult, woo-woo sort of way. The Dweller on the threshold is such a universal concept, yet simultaneously so personal. Now, going back to our first experience with the Dweller back at Stimson Hospital, it makes perfect sense that as paranormal investigators approaching anything we thought we might encounter that night through the lens of ghosts and hauntings, that the Dweller appear to us as an entity, a towering silhouette leaning in a doorway, the most literal manifestation of this concept. And even though I don't think this Dweller is an actual entity, the fact that we viewed it as such makes perfect sense to me. Because if you go in looking for a ghost, perhaps that's what you're going to find. Perhaps that's the language your subconscious uses to speak. Now, Blavatsky wrote that everything preventing us from taking these better steps is a Dweller. Sometimes those forces are internal. Doubt, fear, suspicion, a lack of faith in ourselves. I think Steiner's interpretation built on that, because sometimes these internal forces run much deeper. Old wounds, unresolved trauma, the parts of ourselves that Carl Jung would call the shadow. It's what Steiner believed we must confront before we can continue on our own development. It's just a part of growing up. I'm reminded of a quote by poet W.H. Auden, quote, "Young people who are still uncertain of their identity often try on a succession of masks in the hope of finding the one which suits them, the one, in fact, which is not a mask," end quote. That was us in college. Most people stand at the edge of graduation believing they have the tools and faith and ability to take that next step into adulthood. Maybe not without fear, but with enough confidence to take that leap anyway, off the cliff. Maybe as a fool, but definitely without a mask. So I think that when the Dweller manifested that one night at Stimson Hospital, it was something inside us nagging for attention, saying, "I'm not ready, fix me, you need to heal me before you can take that next step." I know myself, as well as Angela and Brianna, took this as a cue to grow, to look inwards, and I know I can speak for myself and say personal changes were made following this experience. But even though a large part of understanding the Dweller is understanding yourself internally, I think there are external Dwellers as well. Because sometimes what prevents us from taking that better path isn't always our own fear or insecurities. Sometimes it's the people, environments, expectations, or relationships that shape the direction of our lives. I like to think about these external dwellers as parasites. A parasite survives by keeping its host alive, but just depleted enough that the host's energy is no longer being used to sustain itself, and instead that energy is redirected towards feeding the parasite. The host wakes up each day, expends its time, attention, and emotional resources, and slowly begins working in service of something outside itself, instead of building the life it was meant to create. And that's what makes these external dwellers so dangerous. They don't always stop you outright. They don't always destroy everything in one dramatic, sweeping moment. Sometimes they slowly and simply drain you, little by little, until you no longer have the clarity, confidence, or creative energy to take the steps you know you need to take. You become so focused on maintaining the thing that's holding you back that you lose sight of your own path forward. Looking back now, I think that's exactly what happened to us. The original Dweller film was the literal midpoint, the crossroads of our shared paranormal journey up to this point. After the release of the original film, it was time for me to contend with these forces, the dwellers that be, that temporarily stunted the creative output of our collective filmmaking unit. Once adequately dealt with, this past year has seen an enormous outpouring of creativity, newfound motivation, and inspiration for all of us. We released 4 short films, a feature film, screened in several film festivals, and aired over 50 weekly episodes of a new podcast called Paranormal Lens, all in the span of 10 months? What? And we've shown no desire or inkling of slowing down, which in hindsight makes those 2 years of releasing basically nothing impossible for me to ignore. The next film we put out after Dweller is free on our YouTube page. It was in some ways a spiritual sequel to Dweller, because to celebrate the release of the film and its success, we returned to Stimson Hospital for what was supposed to be a joyous, laid-back, celebratory investigation. Dweller is out, people are loving it, let's go back and celebrate. I also envisioned this would be a stark contrast to our previous investigation there, which was the one we filmed for the original Dweller. That was a scary experience. This was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to celebrate the release of the film, but it was still in that period of decompressing, figuring out what all this Dweller stuff meant and what changes we had to make in order to prosper and grow, which we soon would. All this to say, this return investigation did not prove to be the celebration I had hoped for. The old staircase that leads to the second floor patient room, where we first experienced the Dweller, has a landing, and on that landing is an old mirror. Apparitions and shadow figures have often been reported in this very mirror. And I had the bright idea of doing an Estes method session while looking into it. What followed was downright terrifying, as I appeared to get severely affected and channeled something malevolent. The whole thing was miraculously filmed, you can thank Brianna for that, and I would sit on this footage for a long while. But eventually, we would release it as the way too long awaited follow-up project to Dweller, a short film using footage from this terrifying return to Stimson Hospital, which we affectionately called the Possession Tape.
Do you think it would be okay if I just sat up here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, be comfortable. Alright guys, I'm in front of the mirror right now. We're at the notorious Stimson Hospital. It's without a doubt our most frequented haunted location. It's become an annual tradition for us to film here, dating all the way back to 2018. It's a place we're comfortable in, and with that, at least I was more willing to experiment. We know the energy is present here, and we know that this hospital was known for its births, and it built a reputation for its cleanliness and kind staff. It was a beacon of light for the community, and the energies here are good. Any hospital is going to have a strong energy, good or bad, that could affect someone prone to being susceptible to these kinds of things. I know I have in the past. What do you want? And I'm about to again.
You good, Ben? You good?
I just got like rocking on a boat, like the whole floor just. I just saw something in the mirror, like a shadow. The wolves, the wolves, the wolves.
The wolves?
Brianna knows the wolves. We're all too familiar with the wolves. Back in 2022, we conducted an investigation of Oak Hill Cemetery. Something's gonna happen. While alone and separated from the group, I felt like I was being surrounded and then charged by feral, rabid dogs. I'm just on my phone. I dropped my camera somewhere, but something moving. Something's going on. Someone's walking. Someone's. Stay back! I ended up throwing my EMF meter at what ended up being nothing as my only and admittedly lame attempt at self-defense. It was at this moment that I began feeling an itchy, uncomfortable pain on my shoulder, and upon lifting my shirt, I discovered these deep scratches. But there is a lesson here. You don't need to dwell in the darkness to find the answers you seek. There are many great things that could come out of paranormal investigating. Companionship, adventure, preserving often overlooked or forgotten history, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, we can find out what happens next, all while trying to make some sense out of life's seemingly unrelenting chaos.
What?
But the darkness isn't going to give you that peace of mind. Unfortunately, not everyone shares this perspective. When starting our web series in college, we didn't vet anyone that wanted to investigate with us. It was college. It was fun. But when people who want to make deals with unknown beings and boast about their forays into the darker practices begin to infiltrate our investigations, it's difficult to see in the moment that things are now headed down a more negative path until things inevitably boil over.
My head just started killing me again.
A few weeks after this Oak Hill Cemetery investigation, 2 local psychics reached out to us. One identified the entity we encountered as the wolves, and the other claimed to know its real intent and had a warning for us. With a promise to conceal their identity, they agreed to meet me back at the cemetery to tell me this warning in person.
People believed he would actually personify himself as Satan to them and tell them to sacrifice animals and various other objects to him. You apparently need to hear this. A friend of yours who is on your crew, that is female, if you come out here with them again at night, that is the first target. He craves to eat.
We've held on to this footage for a while. We've been calling it the possession tape. I don't know if it was a true possession or just an intense channeling session. All I can say definitively is I don't remember a single moment from this tape. And I also know that as with all things dark and negative, which we try to stay away from, it did have a lasting impact. Shortly after this investigation and potential possession, we helped lead a public ghost hunt event at the Other Side Paranormal and Mortuary Science Museum. A guest captured the scariest photo. Okay, so it's this room, like this angle, any of us have ever seen. Since Brianna wasn't present at this public ghost hunt event, Angela and I immediately hopped on a Zoom call to show her this cursed photo. Here, I'm going to share it. I enhanced it. So
You're sharing it? Oh God, no!
So
there it is.
this photo, and I'm not a big photo guy, by the way.
So
I hate it.
I
That's
don't.
so creepy.
I don't.
Oh, it's terrible.
never
Absolutely
captured-
terrible.
I've never captured a photo or claimed to see a photo that I think is like 100% genuine paranormal
Like
activity.
that's not a person.
So
like that's,
here's the
that's not a
thing.
person
Here's
in the
the
group.
thing.
Did you
Exactly.
zoom in on the face? It looks like a dog. It has a snout.
It looks like it has a top hat on.
Yes, you see the hat too.
Before you go further into it, when you guys sent me the picture, I thought it was a picture of Ben at first, like just a blurry picture of Ben, like the
Do you-
stance and everything
you
looks
know
like
the
Ben.
funny-
I wasn't in the room.
Do you want to know the funny thing is? I showed my mom this, and he says, "Is that Ben?"
But with the enhanced, that it does look like something that you could describe as a hat man, because it does look like it has a top hat.
At this point, we start riffing about the similarities between the viral Hatman entity and the Dweller on the Threshold. None of this conjecture made either original film, Dweller, or the Possession tape, but I'm including it here because it demonstrates how the concept of the Dweller continues to come up in conversation, and we continue to define and interpret other phenomena as they compare to this pivotal experience we had with the Dweller, even something as mainstream as the Hatman.
Let's really dive into this.
Okay.
What do you guys think the Hat Man is?
Isn't it okay? Am I right or wrong? There's an umbrella topic of shadow figures, and then there's one specific shadow figure. I'm so confused personally if there's like one hat man running around, or if it's like a type of entity that all like there's many hat men, but
Could it
still
be
it's
the
like
king of shadow figures?
the king. You said
Yeah, the king of shadow figures.
maybe.
That's the interesting thing about Hat Man, is there is so many things it could be,
Mhm.
and it doesn't seem like there's just one. It could be potentially multiple, and they're not always all the same. Like, you got the classic Hat Man that you see in sleep paralysis. You take too much Benadryl, he's looming in the corner of your bedroom watching you. Then you got shadow figure hat men that you see when you are in haunted locations. Like, I always say the hat man with hauntings is like the opposite of a lady in white. If you're at a haunted location, you're always going to either have a lady in white or a black shadowy figure with a top hat.
Okay,
Like-
that's really interesting because like you think like the white dress and the top hat, like those are all like very like classic, like dressed up people imagery
Mhm,
for like
mhm.
that era. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you take like the archetype of like a dressed up guy with a,
Mhm.
wearing all black and a top hat.
Yeah.
And the white dress.
And then I thought of this the other night when I was thinking about the Hat Man, because one of my old bosses had actually messaged me. It was like, "Hey, have you heard of this thing? I've never heard of it before," and was like super interested in it. And I was thinking about it when I was messaging her back, and I'm like, could he also be considered like a dweller entity?
Yeah,
Like a dweller on the
mm.
threshold?
It could make sense with our experience of Hat Man, if you would say.
Because, like,
Because
yeah,
even beyond that, I'm gonna remind you, the very first written account of the Dweller on the Threshold, named as the Dweller on the Threshold, was in his book called Zanoni. And the very first written documentation of the Dweller on the Threshold was this, like, shadowy demonic being that you saw, like, it woke you up at night and it crawled in bed with you. And that's very much so it's set in the stage of like a guy sleeping, wakes up almost in like a sleep paralysis type of state. This thing crawls on his like chest, right? And that if you read Zanoni through that lens of like a guy having a sleep paralysis, this gives Hatman vibes.
mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, it does.
Hat Man crawl in bed with people?
No,
Well,
but still,
like, so-
the idea of a shadow hunched over you and sleep
And not
paralysis.
being able to move.
But yeah,
That's
but
what sleep paralysis is. You're frozen, you can't move.
a book like back then, like if you think like how they want to explain like the sensation of sleep paralysis, like weight on your chest, they'd put the shadow figure on top of you
Mm-hmm.
because it's easier to conceptualize like this thing sitting on you.
compared to just being frozen, like not
Right.
being able to move, like paralyzed.
Yeah, because that's the thing with like, a lot of these books. I mean, side note, like they kind of were fiction accounts of like real phenomena. So it's like that's just another. But anyways, yeah, that gave. I was thinking about sleep paralysis and Zanoni, and stuff, and I was like, could Hatman be? Because it's also said to be like a really tall. Did you guys see this of like Hatman spirits or whatever people see are like 8 feet tall, like super tall.
Yeah, yeah.
The
I have
shadow
heard
figures,
that
yeah.
before.
But is it because here's a question: is the Shadow Man entity 8 feet tall and like super tall, or is it the shadow of an entity in the shadow? Because shadows are taller than you, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So is that why it's so tall? And also, is the shadow like the shadow figure, the Hat Man, is what we are seeing the actual entity, or is it the shadow of the entity? I guess that's the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because if it is the shadow of the entity, that is literally the dweller, because it is the shadow self. Wait, hold up. Because
How does it
the dweller is your shadow self, like your shadow.
Yeah.
So maybe the shadow is the dweller for each
Spirit.
or whatever.
Because it's also that goes hand in hand with like the double and the doppelganger, right? Like your doppelganger, your double, your shadow, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that we're seeing a spirit and not the spirit's double or the spirit's shadow?
That's a good point, and I really like that idea.
Yeah.
The idea of the dweller on the threshold being a double or a doppelganger was a road we didn't go down in the final version of the original film, but it almost was. There was a lecture by Daniel Hafner posted to the Rudolf Steiner branch of the Anthroposophical Society's YouTube page that I found very compelling. I reached out to them to get written permission to include a brief portion of this lecture in the original Dweller film, which they did provide, but unfortunately just a little too late because the film was already given to its distributor Paraflix for release. But that's going to be amended now. Here is a lost snippet of Daniel Hafner's lecture, a deleted scene, if you will, from the original film. The link to the full lecture is in the show notes of this episode. Please, please, please do go check it out.
There is something like a strange being who, however, is a part of us, accompanying us as a shadow, as a double. E.T.R. Hoffmann writes a short story called The Doubles. Die Doppelgänger, The Doubles, in 1821. Hoffmann also writes something called The Sandman, The Elixirs of the Devil. All these are doubles. Guy de Maupassant, that's late in the 19th century, he writes Le Horla, a horror story where this man is together with this shadow being, this evil being that never lets go of him, and he finally can't handle it and dies. Many of these stories end in capitulation, tragically. Edgar Allan Poe writes William Wilson. Evidently an autobiographical story. Since both of the boys, there's a boy named William Wilson, and he meets another boy who looks a lot like him, has the same stature, and is also named William Wilson. And they both have the same birthday, and that's January 19th, and that is Edgar Allan Poe's birthday. So there can be little doubt that these are autobiographical experiences, or very well known as Robert Louis Stevenson, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They're both the same person in a way. They transform into one another, but the one is master of his own astrality and the other is not. The astrality is master of him. And Bulwer Lytton writes Zanoni. Theodor Storm writes a story called Ein Doppelgänger, a double. Dostoevsky writes a story called The Double. Franz Werfel writes a drama called Spiegelmensch, the mirror person. Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray. A magician-type painter paints a portrait of Dorian Gray, and the portrait changes over time according to how Dorian Gray's inner soul life develops. And because the man devolves into an ever more egotistical creature, his portrait becomes uglier and uglier until he finally has a curtain put in front of it because he can't bear to look at it anymore. And in the end, the only solution is to destroy his own portrait, at which point he dies. That would be 1891, Oscar Wilde. People tend to want to open all the doors and to know all the secrets and to tear away all the veils. It's an illusion to think that just looking behind a door or behind a threshold will leave you yourself unchanged.
I do have harder limits than you guys. Anything where I'm purposely trying to use means outside of the norm to communicate and open doors to something that we don't fully understand is a hard pass for me. And I'm not going to say you guys shouldn't do it, but I'm definitely not going to encourage it. But I'm not going to tell you guys to not do it.
I do have a question for you, Bree.
Yeah.
Because I very much agree that not every mystery needs to be solved.
Yeah, I believe not every mystery needs to be solved. Everything has a risk. And even if you are the most prepared, you could have, planned it for weeks or months even. Anything could happen. You're dealing with an unknown. It reminds me of this one scene in a movie. I don't remember which movie it is, but it was some sort of vampire movie. And some guy was like, oh my god, it's a vampire. And he had every single religious object that's supposed to ward off vampires. And he'd hold up one and it would do nothing. So he'd fumble through his bag and hold up another, still would do nothing. And he just kept doing it and nothing was working. Because it didn't care. It didn't follow the rules of what was written. It still ended up eating him.
Well, when we were in New Orleans, I wouldn't let Angela try to find vampires. That was a hard
Yeah,
limit.
thank God. Yeah.
Well, speaking of New Orleans, we went to the Big Easy right after we dropped our long gestating Dweller follow-up, the Possession tape. When we were down there, we got the most enlightening tarot card reading of our lives. Now remember, this was right after releasing the Possession tape. The psychic that gave us a reading had no idea who we were, didn't know anything about us, or any of the Dweller baggage we may have still been carrying.
Just to explain, I met these fine young folks over at a local New Orleans pub and decided to bring them back to my tarot table. And when we got here, we discovered a whole army of our friends in blue that work on the New Orleans police force, because there's a trail of blood on the ground behind us. A couple got into a fight, and I did at least ensure the safety of our fine guests by asking the cops if it was okay to go back to work. Which is fine. Whoever had a problem isn't here right now. Just ignore the trail of blood over there. Please shovel the car. The first card that shows up in the reading dead center is the Magician, which is the archetypical card that represents the person that brings their thoughts and ideas from essentially the dream world. It often frequently comes up for people that have kind of a magical persona. Usually people that get the Magician card are also very good with multiple elements or different kinds of energies. So the tools on the Magician card are a sword, a wand, a pentacle, and a cup. And they represent the four elements of air, fire, water, and earth. And conjoined, the top point of the pentacle represents spirit. So spirit is like a synthesis of all the other elements, and each of the four elements represent different things which the tools on the table represent. And the passions that we have, not just our romantic or sexual passions, but passions we have for things we're interested in, for things we want to study, accomplish, or do in the world, whether they be in our careers or in our communities. So I love also in the picture that you see roses and lilies. The roses represent your desires, your hopes, your dreams, your ambitions, and the lilies represent wisdom and your life experience and what it tells you. I mean, it's the synthesis of these energies of nature, desire and wisdom, and these energy of mankind's tools created from nature, earth, air, fire, and water, and spirit, right? That allow the magician character to reach towards the heavens and actually bring an idea into manifest reality. Sometimes spiritual things might be able to affect the physical world. I don't actually talk about these things with everybody. Some of this is sort of sub rosa, but I am being very careful because I know that I am being filmed, and I'm an imperfect person late at night that does actually have a lot of knowledge in these things. And what I'm advising you is not to choose to not explore things you're fascinated by or think you could make a difference with or feel moved to. That wouldn't be right of me. But also, depending on your level of training and knowledge and what other people you might be working with, realize that some situations are going to lead to good experiences. And some situations might lead to okay experiences that aren't terrible.
We were in a ritual that was wrong.
And-
it was
yeah,
not good.
I'm going to bet when you guys were walking into it, that some part of you was like, this is a bad idea. Am I right?
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a movable dough, and there's a lot of good and bad in the same exact experiences and things, depending on your perspective, your motivations, your intentions. But if you're working with somebody else, and often narcissistic people, they can convince people to do things that are but stupid. And in situations where you are deciding whether or not you would like to open a portal to blah blah blah, it's maybe a good idea to think about, why are we doing this? Which is also not something I usually talk about around everybody, but since you're already clearly in the process of doing this, I'm trying to tell the person in the Fool card to listen to the little doggy if it pulls back, so that you don't fall off the edge of the cliff while you're smelling the roses. Because you're seeing something cool and spiritual in this experience that you want to have, and something good you want to do in the world. I see that in you. But what I also see is that, like the picture of the Fool card, you're walking up a beautiful mountain smelling a rose with a little dog, and you might not notice that you're walking along a cliff's edge that is very easy to fall down.
The psychic now turns over the moon card.
That's very interesting. It represents a light in the darkness. It represents the feminine principles of the universe and connecting with mystery and intuition. It can represent loyalty and good friends and your intuition about people in your life. Sometimes the moon card also reminds us to not trust everything. The creepy things that can show up in the darkness that you might not see, right? To listen to your gut feelings about what is trustable and what is dangerous.
While discussing the moon card, the psychic pointed out what they interpreted as scorpions at the bottom of the card and connected them to Scorpio energy. Scorpions, Scorpio. And I couldn't help myself from asking, does everything you can't trust be related to the Scorpio, or is that just...
That's part of it. Like, there might be a person in your life or people in your life that might cause drama, problems, or issues. It could represent you're doing rituals and playing with a bunch of spiritual energies that it may be useful to have a guide in some of the things you're trying to do, and it may be useful to think about your own spiritual practices, what you feel. I don't necessarily want to use the word religiously because it is misunderstood in many ways, but on a certain level of being a spiritual person in the world, where are you coming from? Why are you doing the things you're doing? Who have you studied with? And also, just finding a guru isn't always the answer. Reading a lot of books, spending a lot of time in nature, being around good people that have great energy, having an amazing girlfriend you live with, that you cook with, that you have a wonderful time with, that can also look at you if you're about to run off half-cocked and scream at the moon, or trust somebody. Like, listen to her intuition too, because I think she's probably really spot on with many things. You are at a place where the constraints in your life have come off. So if you were being held back in certain ways before, there's pathways that have opened. but have a clear vision of the pathways you're walking down, I think, is the insight of this particular reading here.
I don't think there could have been a more fitting way to end this journey. When I edited the possession tape, the short film I literally just released at the time of this tarot reading as a spiritual and long-awaited follow-up to Dweller, I used 3 tarot cards as narrative hooks to frame the story. I personally love using tarot as storytelling tools. It's a motif I return to often. When I made the possession tape, I didn't overthink the 3 cards that I used. Some were literal representations of what was happening on the screen, while some were symbolically or thematically tied to the messages I wanted to convey to the audience in a subtle yet artful way. Ironically, and I have the chills again, because I'm just now realizing, as I'm editing this director's cut right now in real time, the 3 cards I used in the possession tape were the Magician, the Fool, and the Moon. The same 3 fucking cards, pardon my French, the same 3 cards pulled during the New Orleans tarot reading. Like, seriously. What? How? Like I said, the possession tape is free to watch on our YouTube channel. Even if you've already watched it, watch it again with the context you have now and the knowledge that right after releasing it, we would get the tarot card reading that you just listened to. This is unreal. My mind is blown. I mean, is it just a coincidence? Can you call it synchronicity, or is it something more? I'll leave that up to you to decide. But for now, I hope this 4th installment of the Dweller Director's Cut has shown you that, for us, this experience has had a lasting impact. We still return to some of the ideas discussed and lessons learned, be it in subsequent films like the Possession Tape, or as a reference point when talking about other paranormal topics like doppelgängers or the Hat Man. The original Dweller film is one that people still ask me about. Heck, even a random tarot card reading in New Orleans had something to say about it. Like I keep saying, it was a pivotal experience and film in our investigative journey. I honestly do think that Dweller on the Threshold is one of the most important esoteric topics, and I have a lot more I can say about it. While these first 4 episodes have certainly expanded the original story, there are still many directions and a few small loose ends that will be addressed in future episodes. I'm viewing these first 4 episodes as Season 1 of the Director's Cut. Besides some of this additional commentary like you're hearing now, everything in these first 4 episodes was pulled from pre-recorded materials. In other words, I recut the original Dweller film in a way I found to be more honest and complete. Anything that would require additional interviews or a substantial amount of re-recording beyond some of this expositional commentary wasn't included. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, now that we've revisited the original film together, stay tuned for future episodes, where there will be new interviews, new stories, and new insights, because where the original film was a standalone piece with a defined beginning, middle, and end, that's not actually the best way to tell this story. The door is remaining open, and I invite you to join us, wherever this path leads, because I promise you, the grass is greener on the other side.